Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are just about halfway through the A to Z of PS2 Hidden Gems. What a journey, eh? More than 100 games covered already, because who needs friends, a social life or a girlfriend when there are video games to play? So here we are at the letter L, and there's a few surprises in here for me, and I'll hope you agree. As always, don't forget to make your suggestions for upcoming videos and for ones that I could have included here, and I'll try to include them where I can. And if you're feeling particularly sexy today, you can even check out my Patreon, which has even more content too hot for YouTube. Link is in the description below. But now, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. Let's start with some 3D platformers. Here is Looney Tunes Back in Action, a 3D platform game based on the movie that came out whenever that was released. The movie had Brendan Fraser in it, but he's nowhere to be seen in this game, which does make it immediately crap, but it's actually quite fun. The story is suitably wacky. A blue diamond has been stolen by a monkey in a top hat, so Bugs and Daffy set out to get it back. They'll need to explore a bunch of locations, hunting that damn monkey down so they can give him a good spanking, and of course they'll meet a whole host of Looney Tunes characters along the way. What's cool here is that you play as both Bugs and Daffy, and you can switch between them at any point by pressing the triangle button. You'll need to do this a lot as they each have their own abilities that you'll need to use to explore the levels and track down their monkey and his monkey mates. Bugs can double jump and wall jump at certain points, giving him access to higher areas. He can also dig areas that have soft ground. You'll be able to get past certain walls and barriers doing this, as well as dig up valuable coins. Daffy, on the other hand, can flap his wings to glide slowly when jumping. He doesn't get as much height as Bugs, but can reach platforms that are further away, just not higher. He can also swim, so you'll want to be him in any water sections. As you play, you'll find doors that act as changing rooms. These need to be used by a specific character and will put them into one of their classic costumes from past cartoons, giving them access to new moves and powers. Both characters have a weapon and you can attack enemies as well. The costume powers only tend to be used in certain areas for specific reasons. The gameplay works similarly to Mario 64 type games, where you have to explore the level to collect a set number of stars, or in this case, monkeys. To do this, you'll need to do some tricky platforming, solve some simple puzzles, complete minigames and fight bosses. And actually, the variety is pretty good here. Monkeys don't have to be collected in a specific order, and you are given hints as to what you might need to do to get them. You also need to get as much money as you can. Your adventure takes you all over the world, and you've got to pay for your own travel, so getting new levels costs a pretty penny. Money can be found all over the place though, and you'll meet a ton of the other Looney Tunes characters as you play. They'll give you tasks to do, which sometimes pay you money, and other times give you a monkey. As you can imagine, there is a fair amount of chatter here, with all the characters being voiced really well, and they have a lot to say, sometimes too much and it can get a bit repetitive, but it is great to see all the characters here doing their thing. And it's actually quite amusing at times, as when you're being shit, one of the other characters will basically tell you to stop being crap. I kinda liked it. The graphics here I actually think are really good. The characters all look spot on and animate well, and the variety in the levels is very good. I did sometimes have issues getting around the levels as they aren't labelled too well, and knowing which doors to take wasn't always obvious, meaning I was doing a lot of accidental backtracking. The controls are fine, but some of the platforming is a bit dodgy thanks to the camera that doesn't always let you control it, but for the most part it's alright. So yeah, this is actually a very fun game. I'm a big fan of 3D platformers, and this one is a solid entry into the genre, and probably much better than you'd expect. Next up is Legend of Kain, a really cool 3D platformer that actually probably has more in common with games like Zelda than a regular platform game, though not exactly. You are Kain, a cat who is part of an animal world inhabited by rabbits, frogs, gorillas, rats and a few others. They all live in harmony as they've been living in a state called The Way, where they all live and work together in harmony. But wouldn't you know it, the gorillas and rats are being bastards and start to deviate from the way and are causing all sorts of trouble, stealing gems, kidnapping people and generally being dickheads. Luckily you are a ninja cat, so you go on a quest to beat them all up and restore the way. This is all done in a fairly large 3D world where you'll be visiting the domains of all the animals. You'll need to rescue captured critters from cages or fighting off hordes of enemies, doing some platforming, solving puzzles and going to towns and chatting with people. I really did not expect this game to be anything like it is when I first started playing, and I had a real hard time putting it down. As you explore, you'll meet new characters. A few of them will give you new quests to complete. These come in a few varieties, which you can probably guess for the most part. You'll need to collect certain items, defeat certain enemies, and explore every inch of your areas to find hidden areas that contain statues for you to muck about with. And I said areas twice then, sorry. Completing the side quests will give you upgrades to your health and magic, as well as loads of money and other items like new weapons and armour, making you even stronger. Then you have your main quests, which to be honest are usually pretty similar, but with a cutscene before and after them. But that doesn't mean they're not fun to do, because a lot of it is really well put together. Combat is a big thing here, with you fighting a whole bunch of your usual evil animal types like rats, bugs, gorillas, bears and so on, and there's a surprising amount of stuff you can do. You have your standard 3-hit combo, but you also have jump attacks, dodges, rolls, blocks, super attacks and even magic. You'll need to use a variety of all your moves as you play, as some enemies have certain weak spots and you might need to knock them over with an uppercut slash to expose their weak spot and then do a jump attack to finish them off. Or they might just block everything you do, so you'll need to roll around them and attack them from behind. It's really fun working it all out. There's plenty of big bosses to fight as well, and these have patterns that you'll need to figure out that are really fun to fight. You also get a few power-ups that you can save and use whenever you want. There's ones that make you stronger and faster, as well as a power-up that sees a bunch of hornets follow you around for a while, and they'll attack any enemy that you see. You even get bombs that can be dropped to hurt enemies, but they will run away if they see a bomb, which is cool. These bombs can also be used to destroy walls and uncover secrets. You can usually tell when a secret's nearby thanks to the small holes in the wall giving a glimpse of something behind it. It is very Zelda, and I like it. There's also plenty of tricky platforming here, and it's mostly tricky by design and not because of crap camera or controls, though sometimes it is because of that. Kain can lock onto and home in on certain objects, helping you do combos and get across chasms, and some chests and breakable objects can only be broken if your combo meter is at a certain level, forcing you to fight well and not break up your combos. The variety in the levels is good here, with a range of jungles, forests, swamps, etc, and they all look great. In fact, the graphics here are really damn good. All of the characters look brilliant with a ton of detail and animation, and it looks like it should have been a cartoon or something. It is quite a linear game though, so don't expect a sprawling open world. You are put in levels made up of a few sections that you can explore, but it works well and has just the right amount of challenge. The controls are good, but can take a minute to get used to with some of the button combinations needed for combat. And while the camera is okay, there were times where it swung around wildly and made me make mistakes. I don't have many complaints with this game. It does have unskippable cutscenes, but only the first time you watch them, so if you do die and go back to one before, you don't have to watch it every time, which is nice. My only real proper complaint is with Kain himself. I really don't like the voice actor, who just sounded bored and pretty terrible most of the time, and actually manages to make Kain quite unlikable, at least he was for me. Now, this game did actually get remastered and is available on some of the modern consoles, so some may argue that it's not a hidden gem. But be honest, how many of you actually have it? This is the first time I'm playing the game, and I don't know a single other person that's played it or owns it. But man, I'm glad that I have, as it's really a great game, and I'm very tempted to get the remaster on the PS4, where it will look even better. If you're a fan of adventure games, then this is sort of a Zelda light. It's nowhere near that epic, but maybe more along the lines of Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube. The gameplay here is fantastic and well worth checking out. What's that? You want to see a budget puzzle game that looks like it should have been released on the PS1 or an old mobile phone? Don't worry, I got you covered. Here is Luxor, Pharoh's challenge from Mumbo Jumbo Games. You know them, right? This is a very simple puzzle game of which there are quite a few just like it on various platforms. And the most famous one is probably Zuma, with that frog thing on the front. I'm pretty sure I have that on the Xbox 360. Anyway, what happens here is a scarab beetle pushes a bunch of coloured balls onto the screen, which follow a set path. It's never a straight line though, and the bloody drunk bug will push the balls all over the place. You control a paddle at the bottom of the screen which generates balls of the same colour, and you have to use the paddle to shoot the ball into the ones that are on the screen and insert it so 3 or more of the same coloured ball are put together, at which point they'll disappear. Now, it's possible that there might already be a load of the same coloured balls that are already in a row, but they will only disappear when you shoot one of that colour in there. And that's about all there is to the gameplay. It's simple, but it's also bloody addictive, and I played this for way longer than I probably should have. I even went back to it twice after recording the footage for it. While you're destroying the balls, power-ups will fly out of them for you to grab. These do things like giving you a speed up or making your magic ball one that can join any colour, or sometimes you even get a lightning shot which destroys every ball it touches, so you need to time your shots very well. You also get power-ups that slow down the balls, give you an aiming reticle for a few shots, or make the bug stop for a few seconds. These are all helpful and you'll want to grab them all if you can. You can make combos if you set up the colours correctly, and you get massive points and more items for doing this. It's actually worth doing that as you can unlock perks which can be equipped. These do things like give you permanent speed boosts, extra points, or permanent reticule that makes aiming easier. They last forever, but you can only have one equipped at a time. Every few levels you'll get a bonus stage where you actually control the balls and not the paddle. The paddle will constantly fire balls and you've got to move around so that it lands in the right place, just like Toby Von Doom on a Friday night. Check out the Secret Levels podcast for more information on that. As you progress, the routes that the balls take get more and more complex. Man, I've said balls so much. With more twists and turns, making it harder to be accurate with your shots. And if the Scarab manages to get his balls off the screen, you'll lose. Also, there's parts of the scenery where you can't shoot through, like walls or buildings that they go through, so it means you actually have to plan ahead at times. You do have two coloured balls at the same time, and you can switch between which one you're firing with the press of a button, so you want to make every shot count later in the game. The graphics here are fine for what they are. They're in no way impressive, and wouldn't have even been impressive on the PS1, but they do the job, and for a game like this it's really all you need. The controls are smooth and responsive, which is really all that matters. If you like this sort of thing, then it is actually a fun, addictive game. Yes, it's clearly a cheap budget title, but really it's not a bad game, it just won't appeal to everyone. And if you are into puzzle games, then Lumines Puzzle Fusion Plus might be one for you. It's another simple puzzle game that is bloody addictive. Basically what happens is you're given a grid playfield and blocks of 4 squares appear at the top of the screen. The squares are in a few colours, usually only 1 or 2, but in different patterns, and your job is to place the blocks so they make shapes that are square or rectangular. Once you've made an acceptable shape, it'll change to indicate that it's ready to be deleted. Eventually, a laser that is constantly scrolling from left to right will delete any blocks that are in the square, causing the others around it to fall down into their place. Depending on the game mode, you either do this just forever until it gets so fast that you can't keep up, or until a timer runs out, or until you've gotten rid of a certain number of blocks. You can rotate the blocks as they fall so the squares are in the best position, and as always in games like this, you'll want to be able to create combos for massive scores. As I'm crap at games like this, I wasn't good at making combos deliberately, but when I accidentally did it, I always loved it, and as all good puzzle games do, this one just made me want to keep on playing. You also have a puzzle mode, where you're given various shapes that you have to create using the blocks. I'll be honest, I was rubbish at this and I couldn't even figure out how to complete the first one, but I'm sure you're smarter than me, and you'll probably do a lot better. The graphics are just basic blocks, so they're not impressive in any way, but they are all you need in a puzzle game. It's the gameplay that really stands out here, and it's bloody addictive. And the music here is excellent as well, with a great licensed soundtrack that I've actually looked for online, but I just can't seem to find it anywhere. And really that's all there is to say about this one. It's a simple puzzle game. It's probably not one that many people will want to play on their PS2, but if you do, then you'll probably have a very good time. Let's have a movie license next with Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. This action-adventure game is very loosely based on the movie and book series, and I'm not ashamed to say that I've actually played through this game 2 or 3 times in my many years on this planet. On the GameCube, granted, but still, the PS2 one is basically identical. The story is that you are the Baudelaire children. There's a boy one, a girl one, and a baby one. Your parents have passed away, and you have to live with your uncle, the nefarious Count Olaf. He's a bit of a dick, so you decide to escape his mansion and along the way uncover some secrets that point to the Count maybe having something to do with your parents' accident. Luckily, the girl kid is a good inventor, and most of the game sees you and the other Scrotum spawn exploring various locations, mostly mansion-based ones, looking for the parts that you need to put contraptions together. What I like is that you actually keep all of the stuff that you make, and they're not just made for one-off things. So you'll make a few weapons. The girl spawn has a tomato flinger that works like a gun. The boy spawn has a boxing glove thing that is much stronger, but you need to be closer. Baby spawn just rides on the girl's back, so doesn't need a weapon. You also get things like stilts that let you walk in various liquids and things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, and even some propellers that let you jump much further. Finding the items is never straightforward though, and you'll need to complete other tasks, usually chores given to you by Count Olaf or other characters, which give you the access to other rooms in the mansions, and you'll need to do a fair bit of backtracking in order to find everything you need. Thankfully the areas aren't too huge and it's never particularly tricky. The characters have a few unique abilities as well. For example, Girl Spawn is scared of rats, so if there's ever any around, you'll need to send Boy Spawn in to get rid of them before she'll go any further. Much like the Looney Tunes game from before, you can actually switch characters on the fly with the press of the triangle button. Baby Spawn isn't useless here. At certain points in the game you'll find areas that she is the only one small enough to get into. From here it becomes a 2.5D platform game, and you'll do some simple platforming to open doors or find items, then that sort of thing. These sections are actually really fun. There's also plenty of mini games that you'll need to complete as part of the game as well. These can be stealth based platform sections, rhythm games, boss fights, target shooting games and so on. The variety is quite good and none of them outstay their welcome. In fact, the game itself never outstays its welcome and can be beaten in about 3 or 4 hours, which I think for a game like this is pretty decent. You do escape the mansions quite early on, and you will explore other outdoor environments like some large gardens and a creepy town, and they've really nailed the feel of the movie, with all the characters being a bit weird and creepy, and the locations are all dark and dingy. I actually really like the presentation here, and it made me want to see what was next. And the graphics do a very good job, especially for a game that has a serious look to it. It's done a decent job of getting the mix between realistic and cartoony just right if you ask me, and it works pretty well in the game's favour. There is voice acting here. I don't know if it's done by the actual film cast. I get the impression it isn't, especially for the count, and a lot of the time they just kind of sound bored, especially Boy Kid, but it is fine and it kind of fits the overall odd tone of the game. I really like the locations that you visit, and the lighting and colour really suits it all. And overall, it's just a fun game to play. It is pretty easy, but there's things to collect that open secrets and extras for you to play around with, so there is a bit of replay value. And it is a very well made, especially for a licensed game, and you'd probably expect it to be terrible, but I genuinely really enjoy playing through this one. Time for some racing. Here is LA Rush. This is an interesting racing game with an overly serious story considering the gameplay, but that's alright as you'll probably be skipping most of that anyway. In a nutshell, what happens is you're a world famous street racer who has a massive collection of cars thanks to your amazing driving skills. You go to a party only to return to find your mansion in ruins and all your cars gone. So basically you spend the whole game starting from the ground up, taking part in street races in your crappy car that you use to get to the party. Then you win those races to earn enough money to upgrade your car, take part in bigger races, and eventually track down your stolen cars. As I said, it's a daft story, but it's played so seriously it actually makes it quite funny, but not on purpose. It's one of those games that's trying to be so cool and edgy, but it just comes across dumb and the characters sound like Fast and Furious rejects, and considering the writing in those films, that's not good. However, actually playing the game is pretty damn fun. It's an open world and you're always in a car. You've got a map that shows you all of the available events and races, and you can drive around to any of them and take part. Some are free to join and will give you a few $100 if you place in the top 3. But then you also have some that you can pay to enter, which offer much higher rewards, but of course you run the risk of losing money if you don't finish in a certain position. And the races will be much tougher as well. There's also events dotted around which aren't races. Things like time trials, or even doing things like jumps or skids of a certain distance. Completing these will give you access to more unique vehicles that aren't the ones that you're trying to track down. By completing races, you also find out information about where your cars have been taken. Then you drive to those locations to get your car back. And to do this, what you have to do is drive it from its location back to your mansion, and you'll be chased by bad guys in these parts who will try and ram you off the road. If you lose all your health here, you explode and have to try again, but if you make it all the way back, you keep the car, but you will have to pay to have any damage you took fixed, often costing thousands of dollars. The actual driving is well done, with the vehicles all having really distinct handling and speeds, and as you'd expect, it can take a while to get used to some of them, but you'll soon find your way. Tracks have loads of jumps and twists and turns, and you're encouraged to drive recklessly, with crashes and jumps getting called slow-mo sections. You've even got to look out for traffic. The tracks aren't wildly varied. The whole thing takes place in LA, so most of them are just being in city scenarios, but they do mix it up a little later on. Also, as you need to do a fair bit of grinding to afford entry fees or upgrades and repairs, you will have to replay the same races multiple times just to earn a few quid. This can be a bit annoying, but as you play you'll open up more and more races, so have plenty to choose from. Oh, and you also have to watch out for the cops, who are always looking out to bust your ass. This usually means you have to pay money, but it's not the end of the world if you get caught. The game looks good with some decent car models, and the environment is huge, letting you explore and just drive around at your leisure if you want to, which is pretty nice. The sound is cars, and there's a standard hip-hop soundtrack. I kinda like it. If you like arcade-style racing games, you probably like this one as well. If you prefer your story not to involve wannabe gangsters, then you might want to check out Legacy of Kain Defiance. Now, the Legacy of Kain games have been around since the PS1, but it's only the first two that really ever get talked about. This is actually the fifth and final game in the series, and it has loads of backstory and lore if you're into that sort of nonsense. There's two characters that you get to play as here, the vampire lord Kain and fan favourite Raziel, who is a soul-eating wraith. It's an interesting twist, and the game actually sees the characters travelling backwards through time rather than the usual time rules of going forward, and you get to see all the events that led to the two of the undead tossers losing their wars and lives, etc. It's cool, and I've always been a fan of the Legacy of Kain games. This one is a third-person action game, and you switch between the characters at certain points. Kain's levels see him going through various towns, monasteries and other places where he's fighting soldiers, other evil vampires, and generally anyone that gets in the way. You'll explore quite large but linear levels where you'll need to use your vampire abilities to kill everyone and reach tough areas. Being a vampire lord, you actually start with all your powers, which is quite nice. You can run, jump, glide, climb and even transform into a mist to get through certain obstacles. As well as this, you have telekinetic powers that basically work like force push and pull, letting you grab enemies that are far away and push them off ledges onto spikes, or even bring them towards you so you can kill them with your sword or face. As Kain, you'll need to feed. Being a vampire, you need lots of blood. Your bloodthirst is constantly draining and you'll die if it reaches 0. You'll need to drink the blood of your enemies to keep it topped up, as well as the blood of the conveniently chained up men and women that litter the levels. Fighting enemies is fun as well. You've got a few combos to do, and mixing them up with your vampire abilities is always fun. When you're Raziel, the game is more of a platform game and you're in a Lovecraft looking world filled with monsters rather than humans. Being a wraith, you have to absorb souls rather than suck blood, but the principle is basically the same. Exploring the levels with either character is fun and would be even better if it wasn't for one thing, or maybe two. Mainly the awful camera, which is mostly a fixed affair, and while you can move it around, for the most part it just doesn't go where you need it to and makes some of the platforming needlessly tough. Also, some of the control can be dodgy. It is much more noticeable with Raziel, as he tends to have more of the tricky platforming. But still, this is one of those games that if you're able to get past those things, is a great fun one to play. The story is engaging and I really like the look of the world and characters. It's a fun one to play, and the series as a whole is just one that I really enjoy. None of the games are perfect, they all have their flaws and quirks, and honestly I think this would be a great series for Night Dive Studios to take a look at, remastering them and fixing the camera and control issues, and that would make these games really great. So yeah, check this one out if you can, but maybe play all the games in this series in the correct order. They're a good time. RPG time now with Legaia 2 Dual Saga. If you've been visiting my channel for a while, you might know that I don't tend to review many RPGs, as to be honest I just don't have time to play them and would only be able to show the first boring bits of the game with the obligatory village or forest that you always bloody start with. But hey, here we are with Legaia 2, so I hope you like footage of villages and forests. Anyway, it's an RPG. I've never played the first one, so don't know what that's like, but I did actually really enjoy what I played here. You are Lang, and you'll never believe it, but he has a mysterious tattoo thing that he has no memory of and lives in a sleepy, quiet village. Monsters start showing up, and a double-R bastard turns up and steals the magic crystal that's been bringing life to your village water supply. This means there'll be no fish for your people, so they might starve to death, even though they've got vegetables, cows and chickens, but I guess those will die as well if they don't have water. You are in training as a guard, so you've got a bit of combat experience, so you set out to find the bloke that took it, who also happens to have a similar tattoo to yours. Turns out these tattoos give you magic powers called origins, which are kind of like spirit Pokemon thing that come out of you and are really powerful. They're just magic basically. On your journey you'll meet various characters, some that will help you out and others that will even join your party, sometimes permanently, sometimes just for a short while. You'll need to explore the various list of RPG environments like forests, mountains, deserts, towns and enemy bases on your mission to track down the bad guy. As you'd expect, there's a lot of combat here, and that's where a lot of the fun came in for me. This is a turn-based game, and I actually really like turn-based RPGs and levelling up. The battles here are very interesting though, as you don't just choose from a menu. Instead you have to input button combinations on the controller. These are basically up, down, left and right, which is the direction you'll swing your sword. Doing certain correct combinations of these lets you do special moves and unlocks them that do massive damage, and sometimes have magical or other properties to them. What's cool is that the game doesn't tell you what these combinations are, so you've got to figure them out through trial and error. Thankfully, when you do figure one out, you have a record of it, so it's easy to use them again, and I really liked this. As you level up, you'll unlock more and more direction slots, letting you do bigger, longer, more powerful attacks that might take up 5 or 6 directional inputs. I found this very fun. The enemies are cool, with your usual wolf, bat and plant variations, but there's also plenty of weird mystical enemies that will turn up quite further into the game and will take a fair bit of patience to get past them until you get stronger. Saving is done at crystals that you find, and I do recommend saving as often as possible. Enemies will drop a fair amount of money and health potions, and you do really want to make sure you're fully stocked up, as it can be a while between villages and places you can buy more. Being an RPG, there is also a lot of story, and you actually have a good amount of choice on how you talk to people here, which actually changes what happens at certain parts of the game, which is really cool. The game looks good enough with some decent characters and enemies. It's got a semi-cartoony look, which I think always works well. While I don't think this does anything crazy drastic to other RPGs, I am only 3 hours or so in, so it may well do later on, but I do think the combat and story are definitely good enough for fans of the genre to get stuck into. Legion, the Legend of Excalibur is an interesting game. It's set in ye olden times, where an evil sorceress has killed King Uther Pendragon and encased the legendary sword Excalibur in a bubble thing. He was probably distracted by her massive rack. Fast forward a load of years and you are Arthur, a wimpy punk who is not terrible with a sword. You're on a mission when all sorts of nasty bastards turn up, but luckily you find Excalibur and become king, which gives you some cool magic armour and a much better slash with your sword, which is nice. Of course, the evil sorceress is still knocking about, so you need to avenge your dad and kick her in the tits, but she gets an army of horny soldiers and even some undead minions. The gameplay here is a cross between a top-down dungeon crawler and a real-time strategy game. It's all played from a top-down perspective and you control Arthur. You've got a ton of levels here, which are all very challenging. You'll need to fight hordes of enemies, you've got a few attacks, you can slash your sword, as well as doing some heavier attacks that use stamina, but do twice the damage. If you run out of stamina, you can still use your normal attack, but will need to wait for it to recharge before using your strong attacks again. Killing enemies gives you money and XP. You'll level up, getting more powerful attacks and learning new magic spells along the way. The money can of course be used to buy various items, armour and so on to make you take less damage. And you'll need it, as this is an extremely hard game and you're very easy to kill. Even regular enemies can make light work of you. This is partly down to some terrible collision detection and slow animation, making it hard to attack anyone or do much at all really, but just keep hammering that button and you'll do alright. Or you can do what I resorted to and use a hit and run method where you attack once, run away and attack again, but this is hard to do against multiple enemies. If you have these spells, well, these are often much more powerful, but you'll have to use the same hit and run tactic. What's interesting is that as you play, you can recruit people to join you on your quest. You can have dozens of soldiers with you at any time, and they'll attack enemies and help you out. Except they don't really. A lot of the time they'll just sort of stand there and get killed. So the best thing to do is let them get attacked while you sneak in and stab the bad guys in the back. You get various objectives in the levels, from rescuing people to burning bridges and killing bosses. It's often not entirely clear what you need to do, and if you fail or die, you have to replay the entire level. There's no checkpoints. To heal, you need to find a church and rescue the priest. Then, as long as you're near them, they'll constantly shoot healing magic at you. This means you can spend a lot of your time backtracking almost the entire level just to get healed. But what is handy is that if you manage to get enemies to follow you, you basically never run out of health while attacking them, as you'll constantly be healed. You also do get your health back when you level up, which happens just at the right time and every now and then. The graphics here are alright, the scenery looks like what you'd expect, but the character models are a bit basic and there's little in the way of animation. So, as you may have noticed, I haven't really said much that's kind of good about this game, and that's because actually it kind of sucks and I don't like it at all. But of all the other games I had time to play, this was the best of a bad bunch. I wouldn't really recommend you play it, which is a shame, as the cutscenes here are awesome and they look great, but the gameplay is kind of bad. Sorry. And finally for today, here is Lifeline, voice action adventure. And I'll be honest, I had a nightmare making this video, so apologies. I was getting really into this game, playing it for about 3 hours, and then when it came to record footage, for some reason I couldn't get the microphone on the PCSX2 to work. So it must be where I'm using the dock to record my footage on my Steam Deck, but I'm too stupid to figure it out, so I'll keep this one brief. Normally that wouldn't be a problem, but here the game is controlled entirely with the mic, so I'm afraid I've had to steal some footage to use. Credit to the actual creator can be seen on screen, but please rest assured I have played this myself and it actually works. But anyway, the game. Lifeline is a very unique survival horror game set on a future space hotel, which is attacked by terrible creatures. You play as an unnamed character who is meant to actually be you thanks to the way the game works and its immersion. You're trapped in a security room and you're using the cameras to follow Rio, who is one of only a few survivors and just so happens to be a sexy woman. You're helping her escape and she's helping you track down your missing girlfriend. The twist here is that the game is controlled entirely with a microphone, with you having to issue commands to Rio by actually talking to her. Rio will be in a room, so you'll need to tell her to walk to certain objects, examine them, pick them up, and so on. Just like you would a real person in that situation. And amazingly, the voice recognition works very well. Of course, there are times where it doesn't always pick up what you say, and you will have to repeat yourself at times. And also, sometimes it can be confusing as to what you actually need to say to get her to do what you want. But if you ask me, that's also just like talking to a real person. As with any survival horror, you'll have to explore and find items and keys to solve puzzles that will open new areas and let you explore and rescue other people that you come across. Then there's the combat, which is also controlled with your voice, which might sound a bit terrible, but it's actually kind of fun if you ask me. You can tell Rio where to aim at certain parts of enemies, so you can say shoot head and she'll shoot it in the head, or any other of its weak spots. You usually get a prompt on screen to let you know where you can aim, and this is pretty handy. You can also tell her to get up close, to back off, or to dodge left and right. So you'll spend a lot of your time watching the enemies and learning the way they move, so you'll know what they're about to do. I actually really like doing this, and I didn't really have too much trouble with any of it. The trick is to just make sure that you speak clearly and relatively slowly, kind of like how you talk to your nan. Then it seems to work well. It probably helps that I have a sexy English accent, as I imagine I could have trouble understanding some accents, but it'd be fun to find out, wouldn't it? Graphically, the game looks good, pretty typical for a PS2 game of this era, but that's not a bad thing really. And yeah, overall, I actually really like the fact that they've just gone all out in trying something new. Yeah, it's got its flaws, and you will die because of things not understanding you all the time, but this isn't really a problem if you're emulating thanks to quick saves, and that's probably how I'd recommend playing this one. It's got a cool premise and fun gameplay, and is surprisingly immersive.
Turn right. Turn around. Where should I run away?
So there you go, 10 games for the PlayStation 2 starting with the letter L that you might not have played before. As always, let me know what other games could have been included, as well as any for upcoming videos. Now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Mouth. Yes. Mouth. Red stomach. Red stomach. I'm tired.